A warm welcome back to Sit Still Look Pretty. I'm Priyanka, joining you from the New York City podcast studio, and today we have a very exciting guest speaker. If I can say so myself, she's like the closest to home that I'm going to be interviewing on the podcast in New York. So joining me today is Simone, born in Mumbai and raised in Singapore and shaped by New York City, so many countries already. But today's guest has built a life for herself across cities, cultures, and creative worlds. From her early roots in the performing arts to studying at NYU Tisch to working across global media companies and having recently completed her MBA at INSEAD, her journey is one of constantly becoming. In this episode, we explore what it means to navigate change, embrace uncertainty, and carry your creative identity with you no matter where life takes you next. So welcome to the podcast, Simone.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Firstly, Simone, I'm going to tease you a little bit. Firstly,
Okay.
to coordinate with you and to make you come here, I see that you're constantly traveling.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I've been lucky to be, I think, traveling especially more than ever in the last year or so because I was at INSEAD and doing my MBA and I was abroad. When you first reached out to me, I wasn't even in New York anymore. And I said, I have to do this podcast when I come back. And so thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm so glad that it worked out and I can have you today.
Me too.
I want to start off this podcast by talking a little bit about Simone growing up and her childhood. What were you like as a child? Tell me about it.
Well, I was always into the arts and being a performer. That was, I think, something that my family noticed in me from the get-go. From when I was like 2 years old, I was already dancing around. So that was always a part of who I am. But honestly, as a child, I don't think I was the most gutsy kid. I wasn't like a risk taker. I like clung to my mom. I was a bit of a scaredy kid. I don't think I had to find where I could get confidence from at a young age. And then before I even got confidence socially, I think I found it in the arts. And I honestly think that at the root of everything, because I felt so comfortable performing and I enjoyed music and dance, I guess that's what helped me find any ounce of confidence that I have even now.
That brings me to the question of, I'm pretty sure it's one thing to pursue arts as something like, okay, it's an avenue for me to explore, to take a break from life. But I want to know, what was your like aha moment of like, okay, this is not just something that is my pastime or my hobby. This is something that I want to pursue as like a career. When did that moment kind of like happen to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd already spent all of my growing up years all the way into high school in the arts, both as extracurricular activities, but also then just gradually became my main focus. All of my time went into it. I trained in dance. I took music classes and singing classes whenever I could. And then theater was something that was offered at a pretty high level in my school. I went to United World College in Singapore, and their arts program, all their extracurricular programs, but their arts programs were really, really strong. Wow. And, it was offered to me, as a subject, and I said, because I was so immersed in it and because I had a family that was so supportive of me doing it, I took it all the way through. So I always knew it would be an area of focus, and I even knew that I'd be supported enough to have it be an area of focus in my education, my higher education, even if it wasn't my primary thing. Okay. So I knew that. I knew I was never going to stop doing it. Mm-hmm. But in terms of a career path, I think I flip-flopped a lot about whether I could actually make the leap to pursuing it as my undergrad and whether that would be my main focus. One of the things that I specifically remember, as I mentioned, we had a really great arts program in school, was we were exposed to all of the different avenues something like theater, for example, could take you. So I remember we did a workshop when I was maybe in the 11th grade, so I was only like 16 or 17 years old. And a few of us theater kids, we were in the drama program, and there was a workshop with a psychologist who came in, and she ran, I think it was 3 sessions, where we worked with people who were domestically abused, and they came in to visit the school. They were being supported by another external organization, and this psychologist was working with them using theater and performance as a form of therapy.
Wow.
And we as students obviously were we're young students, we're not trained professionals. So we just got to sit in and watch and shadow, but we got to participate in the workshop. We got to help. And I was blown away because I was like, this is a practical, tangible way where I'm getting to see and remind myself that there's so many different avenues in which a creative or artistic education or foundation can take you. Now, I didn't go down that path at all, but it was like, I remember that so clearly because I was like, no matter what, if I do choose to go down this route and study this, there's so many places I could take it. Yeah. And I never saw it as just like, oh, I'm going to train in acting, which I did, and therefore I can only be an actor. I never saw it that way. And I think that also motivated me to then pursue it in my undergrad.
I'm going to give you a little break from like talking about the performing arts. When I introduced you with the line of born in Mumbai, raised in Singapore, shaped by New York City. Right. I want to know the timeline, Simone, like in terms of like when you made your way to Singapore and then when you came, what brought you to the US. So I want to kind of know the timeline to trace it out because that's a lot of cities.
It's a lot of cities. And I think because I grew up I went to this like international school where people moved around a lot. So I thought that there wasn't that many cities or like that these moves weren't completely unnatural because everybody in my social circle and environment was kind of doing the same thing.
Interesting.
So I didn't really see it as that crazy until later in my life when I've just realized how privileged I am to have lived in so many places. But yeah, I was born in Mumbai, like you said. My family is from there. My parents grew up there. And I'm still very, very close to my life in Mumbai. I'm close to my grandparents there. I've spent a little bit of time there professionally, just briefly. But then, we moved to Singapore in 2001, when I was 3 years old. So it was very, very early in my life. And all of my schooling years were in Singapore. So, that really is like, I'm Singaporean. I'm super proud of the place. I love telling everybody that I'm from Singapore, especially when I moved to the US and there were people who didn't really know it. And this was pre-Crazy Rich Asian, so they really didn't know it. So then I was like very, very proud to proclaim that I'm from Singapore. And then New York was a move that I made for college. I feel lucky that all of my big moves have been through an institution or have been with a community that have helped it make it easier for me to settle.
Nice.
I think making these moves, independently or without some sort of structure is always harder. And so I feel lucky that I've had that. But yeah, New York was for college, but it was a city that I always wanted to move to. I knew pretty early on in my life that I want to be in New York. And when I was 14, I did a dance summer camp here. As I mentioned, I was dancing extensively at the time, at that age. And I did a summer camp. We actually used NYU's like facilities when we were training. And I was like, this is where I'm going to be. I want to be here. I want to be here. I want to be here. Of course, I went through the process of applying to different places. But I think, as I mentioned, the community I was a part of moved around so much. The international school system kind of sets you up quite often for a UK or US undergraduate education. Not always. But my school did. And it was kind of the norm, which is really odd now as an adult that I see it, that everybody just moved off. People ask me like, oh, don't you have a lot of friends left in Singapore? And I'm like, not as many. So because the community was doing it, I felt like I had the right, footing to do it. But they are big moves.
But in that sense, I want to ask you, when we make such moves, at the end of the day, it's not necessary that our family moves with us. So I'm a little curious about that because when you are moving across different cities to pursue, of course, a different chapter of your life, how do you deal? I feel like this question is more for me, actually.
No, but I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I think it should be a two-way conversation.
But yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts in terms of like how do you manage your emotions in that sense, or like being away from your family, I'm pretty sure your best friends don't move across the city like with you. So I'm very curious on that aspect of your life. How do you find this anxiety? Has there been moments of like frustration or like
Totally. I still remember, and I think this was the case for so many people in my position, one of the biggest moments of frustration was COVID. I actually did make the decision to go home briefly during that time, so I got family time. But that decision-making process was so difficult for anyone who was here dealing with visas and being away from their parents. And New York City was one of the places that was hit the worst at first. And I still remember for like that first week, maybe 5 days, there was this constant flip-flopping that we were all debating whether I should go home or if I should just hustle it out in New York, because I was finishing up school and I didn't want my visa status to change, and I had all these things I was juggling in the air, and I kept saying, no, I'm going to stay put. In hindsight, I'm so glad I got some time back in Singapore. Obviously, Singapore was a great place to be during COVID in terms of how they took care of us. But, it was a big decision to then say, okay, now I'm going to leave all my friends. And I was in a relationship at the time, and I didn't want to leave my partner. So it was like I was always choosing between being on two parts of the world, and that was the hardest period because there was no way where anyone knew when it was going to end. So that's been hard. I am really, really close to my parents, so I try to get as much time with them in my year as possible, and they feel the same way. And I think I'm lucky right now, knock on wood, that they're like able to also travel a lot. They enjoy it, so we all just try to gravitate to the same places, or make sure that we're planning our trips accordingly. In fact, my dad is here now in New York and spends a lot of time in New York. So that's great. Like, I'm really, really lucky. Not everyone has that. Yeah. But it's still hard. It's still hard when it's like, right now my mom's in India and she's looking after her parents, and like, we're here and we're all just spread out a lot. So, these things I always feel weird talking about them because they are first world problems. We have the opportunity to move around so much. I have the resources for that, and it's a massive privilege, but it does come with the frustrations that you mentioned.
You said it with so much of grace, because like exactly like what you say, sometimes we are complaining about like all these things, and then you sit down and you take a step back and you think about it. This is a privilege that not a lot of people...
Massive privilege. I just have so many pinch me moments. I'm like, what is my life? Like, I'm sitting around being like, oh, I have like belongings here and my like family's here, and then I'm going to travel here. But that is crazy. And to be able to live that life, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And it's taught me everything I know, being able to be from so many places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that you have covered that, I want to talk a little bit about home. That is home to both of us. I want to talk about Singapore. When you make the move out of Singapore and come to the US, I think the stark difference is truly that not only is it like one end of the world to the other end of the world, I think we are talking about safety, we are talking about comfort, we are talking about systems, even systems being completely different, the way even as simple as the way your visa is handled, the way life you handle, the way you...
The pace.
Everything changes, right? So my question to you is, when you first moved to New York City, was it everything? It's one thing to be like, it is my dream to live here, but was it everything that you hoped for?
It was everything I hoped for in terms of the things I got access to. I was following where creative industries were and where I got energy. And because I'd had a glimpse of New York very briefly and what college life in New York could look like through that summer program I did, it ticked those boxes. But I think there's so many things that I've had to reflect on over the years of what was challenging. Obviously, some of the obvious things that you mentioned. New York is dirty, New York is scary, and it can be unsafe. That coming out of Singapore is a culture shock no matter what, no matter how much travel I had done beforehand, no matter how much global exposure my family gave me, like I was still startled to see it. And yeah, it's something that you have to learn how to navigate. It toughens you up, and I'm glad I got that. But, we say these things like toughens you up. Like, you don't really want to live in a world where you have to feel like you have to be toughened up. Do you know what I mean? I'd much rather not live in that kind of environment. The other thing that I found interesting to me is how a city as chaotic and busy as New York, you can actually feel the loneliest in a place like that. And even that has had pros and cons, because I now tell people that I'm so used to that I kind of like this anonymity of I can disappear in the chaos of the city and find my own space. Not everyone's in your business. No one knows what you're up to. You're not really bumping into people because there's just too many people. That said, in my early years here and choosing to go to a college it didn't have a campus, you're just NYU, you're just tossed in the middle of the city. You really have to make an effort to do things, to meet people, to motivate yourself. It's so overwhelming. Everyone is doing a million things at once. And you can feel really, really lonely, especially in the early times when you don't have community yet. or any transition period, as I mentioned, COVID and things like that, people move around a lot. It can be a very lonely place, and I don't think I expected that, because you'd look around and you would never think that Manhattan would be a lonely environment. But I don't know if you feel the same way. I'd love to know what you think, actually.
I feel like so well said that like I might have a tear in my eye. No, I'm just kidding. But it's truly, truly well said, because I know that when I moved here, Simone, like within 3 months, I called back home and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And I agree with you so much, because prior to that, I have done so much travel, like exactly like what you said. I've like been to Europe, like stayed there for 6 months. So what you would think that this was something, this exactly like you, this chapter of my life was like my dream. Like I want to move to New York City was something that was since young, you know. So when I got the offer and things like that, I was like, that's it, this is it. And in 3 months, I was like, I want to throw everything out, because this is exactly not like, it's like exactly like what you said, you're surrounded with so many people, and yet it's so jarringly quiet. And at the same time, when you're going through, I don't know if you relate to this, when you're also trying to manage your own emotions, you also have a ton of things that life moves on, right? You have a ton of things that you need to do for school, for work, so it's like,
you don't have the time. You don't have the time to manage those emotions.
I remember at one point in my life, I would be crying, and then I would wipe my tears and I would start my work, and I would be like, what is this? Like one moment you're crying, the next moment you're working, like.
But it's so accurate to New York, and it's such a stereotype. But like, I've played into the stereotype a million times of crying on the subway. Like, I truly believe the New York moment, and like that's those moments where you're crying and then you like have this out of body experience, and then you're looking at yourself and you're like, I'm just crying on the New York subway. I've had so many of those moments. I love it now, because I'm like, I love that I'm in a city where I can just do whatever the hell I want, be myself, and nobody cares, and no one's batting an eye unless you really need help. I think New Yorkers come together for that. But that's like exactly what it is. It's just like I'm mid-commute, I'm gonna have a quick cry, and then I'm on with my day.
But it's weird because it's so tough, and yet weirdly it is so rewarding. I think that is something that you probably experienced, right? Like multiple times you cry about it, and then the next moment you're achieving great things, and you're like, okay, you know what, it's okay, it's worth it.
It's so true. And I'm always having pinch me moments. I mean, I've been here for most of the last decade, and I still tell myself, oh my gosh, you're living your dream.
I want to touch quickly on your journey in NYU Tisch, because let's be honest, getting into NYU Tisch is one of the hardest to get into. It's one of the most prestigious programs as well. I want to know, because I had my own set of emotions when I got my acceptance letter from NYU, but I want to know from another NYU student, like how did it feel, that moment getting that acceptance letter? Where were you? What were you doing? I need the details.
I remember it so clearly. I mean, Tisch was always a dream school from whatever little I knew of it growing up on the other side of the planet. I was like, this sounds like what I want. It is a conservatory-style focused arts education in a big university that allows me to have liberal arts education as well. And I actually held back for a little while from applying to Tisch specifically, or because you have to go through an audition process. I just didn't think I had the right level of training that other kids in the US probably had access to. Even though I had done theater and I was a dancer and I'd been trained, I felt like acting was quite different. I hadn't been auditioning for Broadway touring shows at a young age. You know, a lot of people in the US have those opportunities. I didn't really have that. So I felt very underqualified. And I just felt like if I was going to apply to NYU, which I did, I knew I would, and it was one of my top school choices, I would feel weird if I didn't give it a go, given that this school had my dream program. I said, I'm going to regret this, so I'm just going to give it a go. And firstly, I remember everything happening always early in the morning because it was Singapore. So I was like, my interview, because at Tisch you had to do an audition, and then you had to, like a virtual audition that you send in, and you had to do an interview. And my virtual interview was at like 4 a.m. Singapore time or something ridiculous, 4:30. And I remember doing that so clearly, like it was all dark outside and I was doing this interview. And similarly for my acceptance letter, must have come in around the same time of day. And I think I woke up, I like didn't even tell my mom that I was already up. I like went into the room. I was just, this is such a bad habit, and something that I'm saying here on camera and on mic so that I kill this habit in the future. I was expecting the worst, because I feel like I just go through my life expecting to not have that success moment. So I was just expecting a rejection, and I very clearly remember opening that letter and feeling so relief also, because you work so hard at that stage to get into college and everything, but just feeling like, oh my God, I'm about to live my dream. And that was a really cool feeling.
But I have to say, speaking about killing that habit, I feel like it's a habit a lot of people have. Even I have it. When something good happens, I go like, okay, so when is the next bad thing that is happening now? You know, which is a very bad like habit. I'm glad that you brought it up, because you hope for other people, like good things to happen to the people around you. You would hope for the same thing for yourself. And I feel like we don't do it for ourselves, but we do it for other people like so willingly. So well said.
The other thing that I have noticed that I started to do is, so I'll give this advice to my friends a lot, of like celebrate the things that you're achieving, because once you've, say you get into a really good school, this happened again with INSEAD. It was like by the time we'd all reached graduation, we were all so jaded that I feel like some people weren't wanting to even like celebrate graduation that much, which is a big achievement to get through it, because it was like you'd gotten in, okay, I've gotten through this tough year, now what's already thinking about what the next thing is. But I'm often giving that advice to my friends and not actually doing it myself. So even now when you mention like, oh, getting into Tisch is an achievement, I feel like sometimes I just laugh it off. But it's true. I should tell myself that both of these schools were achievements, or, you know, whatever I've done at this stage of my career has been an achievement.
Going in line with your achievements, the next one that when I looked at, I was telling my fellow co-host, she's Priya and she does it back in Singapore. I was telling her, this girl is so cool, because not only did you graduate out, you worked in some of like the coolest companies, like Vox Media was one of those, right? And you also had a moment where you co-founded your own company. You are into your early 20s, right? So I want to know, what was those early professional, like going into, you are transitioning from school to your work professional life. What was that like? I'm pretty sure there will be highs and lows.
So many. I mean, I was always an overachieving kind of workaholic, especially through NYU. I did a lot of internships, and I feel like that set me on a level of momentum where I was just like always chasing the next one. Because about halfway through, or maybe the end of my first year, but about halfway through the 4 years there, I knew that as much as I loved performing, I wanted to be a producer. I really liked this idea of building like the full project, managing it end to end. I wanted to maybe be in control a little bit of what I was creating. Don't know what that says about me. But I was like, I really liked the idea of being a producer. So all of my internships were production focused. And even that was like a big mix of larger corporations. I worked at some of the bigger ones as well as small firms. And I felt like I was just kept chasing the next opportunity. And then I can't believe I've spoken about COVID so many times in this chat already, when sometimes I forget that COVID happened. But COVID happened when I graduated. I graduated in 2020. And I was thinking, now what? Because I've had crazy momentum at that time in my life. I was full of energy and stuck at home. And I was uncertain. And I said, I need work credits and I need to be doing something. And my best friend from NYU, she and I are really, really similar. And we had the same thought process. And we were chatting all the time on the phone and thinking, what can we do? What can we do next? And of course, people were applying to jobs, or, you know, you're emailing your old manager from like your first internship saying, hey, do you have anything going on? But everybody's like, we're on lockdown. What do you mean? Do we have anything going on? Like, we have nothing for you. And so that's how we decided to found our own company. And, you know, it came entirely from a need and a mission, rather than just saying I wanted to be an entrepreneur. At that time, I think I was very early in my career to be an entrepreneur. I felt, again, not really ready for it, but I was so motivated to create some sort of change. Our goal was to create work opportunities for our peers in the same boat as us who didn't have that first like professional or artistic credit to build their portfolio. And so we wanted to produce some content where they could, you know, really work on small sets that were safe. Everyone was being tested, but, you know, that somebody needed to coordinate that, and we said we'll be the ones to coordinate it. And we also like, you know, we created networking events, and we just wanted people to connect. And that was great because I can now link my interest in like the business side of my field, which I've been pursuing, to that moment. But it just came from like hunger and drive. I don't think I had like a clear plan. Maybe I should have, but at that time, no one really had a plan.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
again, it takes a level of privilege and resources and support from somebody's family to say, hey, I'm going to give this a go. And it's probably not going to earn me any money, but hopefully I'll be able to create some change, learn so much, because I think I learned more in that process, in that 1-2 year process, than I did in anything else I've done. Vox was my like next professional stint. I'd already worked at several other media companies before, but I was a producer at Vox. I got to do a mix of creating content as well as like strategy work, which is what I then wanted to pursue later. And it was an amazing experience.
See, this is what I said. You're a cool girl and so many achievements. And now we can finally move on to the chapter that, of course, I think everybody wants you to talk about, safe to say. You pursuing your MBA, the move to like Europe for a period of time. Take me through that journey, we can start off with like what made you do the decision of, hey, it's time to pursue my MBA.
Yeah. It wasn't that clean. It really wasn't very clean. I was working at Vox, and I'd already, again, this is where I say that I'm deliberately forcing myself to acknowledge that I already did one of the dream things, you know? I think in that time I was like, okay, now what? I need to do more. But, you know, I got to live my dream. I was working at a media company in New York that I loved. I was doing creative work. I was working with the coolest people. But, I think I just started to feel an itch to work my way into management roles. I wanted to grow professionally. I'd already spent like a couple of years there as a producer. And again, the creative work is the foundation of everything I've done. But I started to actually enjoy the whole process of leading projects or the strategy. And I was shocked. I was even enjoying the whole thing of like, let me look at the performance data of this video and, you know, all that stuff that people complain about in like a corporate life. I actually liked it. Like, I can't deny that I liked it. I was like, this is fascinating. Like, I'm really seeing the impact that these creative projects are having. So super nerdy, but I was like, no, I'm actually liking all this data stuff and all the strategy stuff. And I just was thinking about what is the next professional move. My father had done the INSEAD MBA when I was 2 years old, so 25 years ago. And I never thought I would do the same thing because I just didn't see myself going down that path. Almost no one does an acting undergrad and then ends up doing an MBA. Like, I can think of very few people who have probably gone down that route. And so my creative friends were kind of like unsure, or not, they didn't talk me out of it, but I think there was a mismatch. Like, they weren't doing this, is what I mean. And then people applying for MBAs in my community did not have my background. So I never really thought I would pursue that. But I think as I started to talk to my father about his experience, I started to see the differences between like maybe what he did, which was a specific route, and what some of his peers did, you know, what it offered them, what it offered people in different sectors with different backgrounds. An MBA program is really special, and you know, generalist programs like this have started to become a bit, I don't know, people have started to debate whether they're needed. But I still think it's really invaluable because they bring together people from so many different walks of life and industries. And like, you know, people come from the army, there are doctors, there are artists like me who decide to pursue it because at the end of the day, business is at the core of everything that we do. And understanding the business is so important. So I started to believe that this would help me no matter what. Definitely to grow into the roles that I was like dreaming of. But also I was like, you know, I just don't see how this could do anything but help me.
Okay, now talk to me about you living in Europe. How was that whole experience for you? Just as much as it was exciting to move to New York City, you said it was your dream, right? So talk to me about that. How was the experience?
Yeah. So I kind of knew that I'd apply to INSEAD. My dad went there. I know all his friends. I was a toddler when he was on campus, so I have a big personal connection to the place. But I just really wanted the chance to live in yet another environment. France, I can't actually logically explain my connection to France other than I just have always liked it. It's something about how it's full of art and culture. I love the food. Paris is just a place that I'm really drawn to. People always ask me, like, what's your thing with France? And I don't have a good answer. I'm not French at all, other than my name. Like, there's no connection. So I'm just really wanted a chance to live there. And I'd spent a little bit of time in Paris already before. I'd already kind of gone there whenever I could. But I said, this is going to be something that is fully different to anything I've done. I've lived in Asia, I've lived in the US. I want to do yet another place, experience Europe. But then also INSEAD specifically, I chose because it was a callback to my international school education 10 years ago. And in a very different way, as I mentioned before, went to a big international school in Singapore, and I loved that people were from so many different nationalities. Though still at that stage, you're still in high school together, you're growing up together, you kind of become very similar, even if your families are from all over the place. INSEAD gives people the opportunity to live and work and study with people who are from 75 to 80 different countries who have become adults in those countries. These are 30-year-olds who are working in different sectors all around the world. And I was like, this is an opportunity that is so rare. When in my life am I going to get that? So that was more important to me. I mean, the MBA itself and the degree was important to me, but that experience was really, really important to me.
Like what you say, living the dream, and I truly, truly hope you get to live many more such surreal, cool moments. But that almost brings me, we are almost wrapping up, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think throughout your interview when you spoke, something that was always at the back of my mind was asking you about imposter syndrome, because I honestly feel like it's something that I suffer from. And I also know that there are practically a lot of people that suffer from that. And I feel like you kind of touched on it, because there was twice I think you said I'm doing so much, but then I always ask myself the question what is next? And I feel like that is something that a lot of us struggle with. It's like you are doing so much, and yet it's like, okay, am I doing enough? Okay, am I on the right track? Maybe I should start thinking about the next thing. I have this very bad habit personally for myself, whereby sometimes I feel I ruin my present moment because I'm constantly thinking. For an example, just to quote, I'm done with my studies in December this year. Believe it or not, what I'm thinking about is, what am I going to be doing next year? Where should I? So it's more like the present moment gets ruined so much because your head is always, I feel like it was the same thing with my bachelor's. It was always like, okay, what am I doing next?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, I know this is a tough question, so you can take your time with it, but how do you have such moments? It's going to be the first question. After that, we're going to talk about some advice that you would want to probably give.
I think in all of these opportunities I've gotten, I've always believed I'm slightly underqualified. Whether it was Tisch and I didn't feel like my childhood training was enough, which is crazy because I was entering education. I shouldn't be thinking that, but I did. Or at INSEAD, I was under the average years of work experience there. So I just literally had less professional experience to most of my peers, didn't have any business background, whereas a lot of them did. So I was a complete lost soul in all of those finance classes. Till now, some things I was like, did I really learn that? Or did I just regurgitate it in the exam? I'm not sure. But yeah, I have imposter syndrome all the time. When I'm dancing, I'm like, oh, I didn't complete all of my ballet training, and I feel like an imposter even there. So even the things that I've spent the most time on, I feel kind of behind. I'm lucky, and this is actually not how I deal with it. It's how I have been helped to deal with it, rather.
Okay.
I think the people in my life have made a huge difference to me in terms of me processing this decision making. And just going through my day when I'm dealing with imposter syndrome. I really use my friends and family as a sounding board. I'm really lucky to have parents who have supported all the different crazy steps of my career. Everything from saying, hi, I want to be a professional actor, which then they said, cool, give it your all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To then me saying, actually, now I want to do this. I want to pivot. And then again saying, cool, let's see how we can help you give it your all. So that's great. But they also keep me kind of grounded in what's realistic, what to expect, where to have patience. I don't have a lot of patience. My friends as well. I think it's really easy to compare yourself to your peers, but they're also the best people to just openly speak to. One of the things I really wanted to say was last year, I think we went through almost the entire year and none of my peers and I had spoken on the topic of money. We could make a whole other podcast about this. But it was about how, especially young women, don't really discuss money. And like, you might be entering a job and not knowing where you stand in terms of your salary or like what you're worth. And I think it took like 9 or 10 months for us to actually have that discussion. But when we did, it was like, I felt like such a weight off my shoulders because we were just sounding things off of each other. But I felt like, okay, I have a space where if I then feel like I have to tackle this problem, I can always come to these people and like openly discuss it with them and feel supported. Not really imposter syndrome, but it's just like, you know, things that are playing on your mind and how you deal with them. And then finally, I'm a big advocate for therapy. I've been in therapy for 5 years, and I am a huge advocate for mental health. I think if you're going to the gym and you're training your body and you're taking care of that, you got to take care of your mind.
Whether or not you have given a pet to yourself, I truly feel like you should stop and take a moment and give yourself. It is not easy to make it here, in the sense of after moving here, I have a whole new sense of like empathy and admiration to anyone that moves far away from home and sets their life up. You didn't just set your life up. I feel like you set your life up for success, and I wish you so much more success, Simone, like truly from the bottom of my heart.
You were so sweet. I could say the same to you, and I think like, yeah, it's just crazy. Like you said, it's we have to have a pinch me moment. Like, we're both from Singapore. We're living in New York. We both love it here, but we're also so in love with where we're from. And it's just great to meet like-minded people.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.